Welcome to a special Earth Day broadcast here on Independent Women's Network. I am Gabriella Hoffman, director of our Center for Energy and Conservation at Independent Women's Forum, and I'm joined by some very special guests today to talk about the state of the environment and what is going on. We're really thrilled to have Donna Jackson, who is the director of Project 21 at the National Center for Public Policy Research, and Christian Palich, who is vice president of Taft Advisors and also a former senior advisor at the Department of Interior, and both also happen to be board advisors to the Center for Energy and Conservation. So both Donna and Christian, thank you both for joining this really riveting conversation on a special day like Earth Day.
Thank you for having me,
Gabriella.
I would like to pose this first question to you both. We see a lot of rhetoric come out from this administration and some of this preservationist environmental left that likes to say that the state of the environment is so awful, so atrocious, yet the facts tend to point to an improved environment, even with improved productivity, GDP growth. So according to both of you, whoever wants to start first, what do you think the state of the environment in the United States is today? Is it this negative, deleterious kind of situation we often see our opponents on the other side say, or are we actually charting a really positive future for energy balanced out with obviously sustainable economic growth? So what is the state of the environment today?
Do you want to go? Well, you know what? Oh, well, let me say this. The environment is in the best shape that it's ever been in decades. I mean, there's been so many innovations that we actually have all of the gripes that they're making about the environment being in this catastrophic state is false. I mean, the one thing that you need to realize is these climate change activists, their primary goal is A, controlling your life, and B, determining the direction of this government and trying to build a larger government. And so, you know, there's a lot of ways you can do it, but when you're taking over the economy, you have to have something to build fear in people. And that's what they're doing with climate change. And let me tell you, it's the climate change policies that's destroying the country, not dirty air. And so I think that we need to make sure that we push back in this, because one of the things I always bring up, they've destroyed African-American communities based on using over-regulations, and they use these pretenses. The new pretense is the green tinge, which is climate change. And if you want to know where this is going to end, just look at African-American communities that have been under these types of over-regulations for 60 years.
Well, Christian, how do you respond to the question?
Yeah, and coal mining communities too. I mean, we've seen it in southern West Virginia and all over America's coal mining communities. And, you know, we look at the country today, we burn coal cleaner than we ever have in the world. We have some of the cleanest water, cleanest air, and you compare it to other countries across the globe. And as we celebrate Earth Day and how important that is, nobody's more good stewards of the earth than the coal miners that I proudly see when I go out to the mines. These guys hunt and fish. They want clean water. They want clean air. They want their lands to flourish with wildlife. And we always want to protect them because we're in these communities as well. So we've had real environmental problems across the globe. I mean, if you go to China, I mean, there's days where the air is unbreathable because they don't have the same emissions controls that we have in this country, and why we burn coal currently as it is cleaner in the world. My wife was born and raised in Vietnam, and I tease her because she can't swim. And she goes, well, swimming was in the lake was polluted. You know, in my town growing up, I couldn't learn to swim like I could in the pond where I grew up in Ohio. Just little things like that we forget. And what comes with a positive environment, and that's economic growth, being able to have fantastic reclamation projects like the companies I represent do, or anything like that with the emissions controls. Economic growth builds all that, which is what baseload power does to an economy. So all over the globe, I think there's real environmental problems, and I think we're blessed in America to not face some of those same problems. And we just have to keep doing what we're doing here is what I would say to that, Gabriella.
That's an excellent observation. And I have been to a lot of these reclaimed coal areas where in Virginia, as you mentioned, there's a flourishing elk herd. Deer populations are strong there too. And it's not a choice between having industry there and then also allowing for this flourishing environment to even give way to tourism to bolster that region, especially these regions that have been so hard hit by regulation, volleying back and forth from having industry or having administrations that are not favorable to having favorable administrations back to unfavorable. So these areas are very susceptible to that kind of administration change, but they're proving, I think, even sometimes better than the cities and more urbanized areas, that you can balance stewardship with very smart industry. And this is where I want my next question to go for you both is, so what, given both of your involvements in, whether it's directly involved in the industry as you are, Christian, with coal, or with you, Donna, talking to a lot of industry players, what are they conveying to you about the state of the environment, their involvement? Go a little bit more into that, because I think a lot of people will see these industry types as obstacles to clean energy. We often see kind of in the other side of things that are more extreme end, we see a lot of companies or industry players kind of giving into this climate alarmism, giving into ESG, environmental social governance platitudes, and feeling pressured to be honest in their coal, oil, natural gas, geothermal kind of productivity, or trying to be dishonest or try to hide the accomplishments of these industries and kind of virtue signal. So what do you think industry should be doing in terms of having a say or news making on conservation or stewardship of the environment?
Well, you know what? I talked to a lot of people in the plastic industries because, that's one of the industries they're trying to go after. What they found is the Biden administration is actually hamstringing them and trying to actually come forth with innovation. They have innovation that can actually improve their industry, but this administration has this one size fits all. And it's really about destroying and deindustrializing America. Let me tell you something. My family migrated here. So my great grandparents and my parents, they migrated from the South to the North to the Midwest because of industry. They worked in the auto plants. They were able to work there, buy houses, raise families, build financial wealth. And because of it, the next two generations actually were able to get college education where we don't have to have any government dependency. We're self-sufficient. And my grandparents and I have aunts that are in their 90s and 100. Now, if this industry is spewing out so much pollution, why are they still thriving? So there's a disconnect between the message and then what they're pushing for. They want to deindustrialize America because they want to push everybody into what I call smart cities, where they're really open air prisons. They want to make sure that people don't have and are not able to build wealth. When my grandparents were coming up, they could afford to buy homes. They could afford to help their kids buy homes. Do you know today, because of environmental policies, we have the lowest home ownership rates for African Americans that actually since Jim Crow today, because of all of the environmental policies that create artificial scarcity. Communities thrive for industry because of industry. Poverty thrives when you don't have industry. And that's the bottom line. Wealthier communities with industry has better environmental environments than poor communities. But what they're trying to do today is create a barrier for lower income people trying to get into the middle class, but they're also trying to push middle class people into poverty. And they're using environmental policies to do that. So that's one of the reasons why I speak out, because I actually have members that are a truck driver who had a thriving business. And he was actually put out of business. He had 14 trucks, employed people in the community. And they pushed him out of business because of the Clean Air Act, because they said he was polluting the environment. Now, all of these people are low-wage workers, and some of them, went and had mental problems afterwards. Some committed suicide. they're trying to take away the ability of people to have wealth. And this country was founded on the fact that anybody can determine their own fate as long as they put in the effort. And that's what they're trying to destroy.
Well, talking about industry, I feel somewhat uniquely qualified too to talk about this because I'm from Youngstown, Ohio, and many people have seen the stories about Youngstown, what happened with the steel mills there, places where my grandpa worked, and so many of my friends and relatives. When industry left, Youngstown's a shell of what it was even before I was born in the 80s, which is so sad. And we've seen tons of flight out of Northeast Ohio or the Cleveland area and Youngstown to go to other places, and these jobs haven't been replaced in our areas, but they've been built up in Manhattan and San Francisco and LA and Chicago. And that's great. We want those jobs as well. But it's connecting the industries to the other industries and the dots that I'm not sure everybody, especially in the Biden administration, always can connect of. If you want affordable energy to have the jobs of the future, you need the same coal miners in Wyoming and West Virginia and Indiana to provide that energy to sell to you guys. Now, the dirty secret is California still has to buy energy from coal and natural gas on the spot market. They're still doing that no matter what, because the lights literally wouldn't be on in the state of California. I tell the story. I was at a wedding with my wife last year in San Jose, and I remember I turned on the hotel room TV, and it was Gavin Newsom talking about, hey, keep your thermostats at a certain level so we don't have blackouts, keep your, don't use too much energy here. And being an Ohioan, I was like, that's kind of crazy to me, because in Ohio, we have a lot of coal and natural gas that keeps those lights on. So when industries leave, towns are decimated. It doesn't matter where it is in the world. It's the same thing everywhere. When economic growth leaves, people leave, tax base leaves, and really bad things happen. It's connected to the fentanyl crisis. It's caused to everything else we see across the globe, and it's really sad. And it's picking political winners and losers we've seen in administrations using policies like the Clean Air Act that Donna talked about, the Clean Water Act, things that were meant to keep our waterways and air safe, which everybody wants. I hate to even say this, but we all want clean air and water. Saying that, I reject the premise nobody does as a coal person, but we do. And that's what those rules were meant to and laws were meant to do. But they've been changed for political gain to pick winners and losers. And unfortunately, many of us, as we're talking about today, have been to these communities where they were picked by, whether it was the Obama or Biden administration, as the losers in this new modern economy. Now, when it comes to what we talk about Earth Day, you brought up the elk herds in Virginia, Gabriella, about, you come to our reclamation properties out in Wyoming or West Virginia, I could take the most hardcore Sierra Club anti-coal person and be like, take a look at those antelope up there. And they'd be like, yeah, that's why we don't want you to mine coal through there. And I'd be like, we did 30 years ago. That's reclaimed. That's the kind of stuff we like to show off at our mines. We produce this coal to be burnt so that communities can be built up. And we can still, if we use the stuff in America, it's going to help everything that so many people that say they want to protect the earth want to, instead of outsourcing it overseas. So that's my answer on this, is we just need to do more things in America where we know how to get it right. And we need administrations that actually let us do our job, let us follow the standards that are meant to be in place to have clean air and water, but don't use them for political gain with faulty science or anything else just to put us out of business as an industry, because industry is not a dirty word. It means jobs and economic growth. We need to take that back, reject the premise that every industry wants to pollute and have massive profits. We reject that premise. We want to, of course, make money. That's how we keep people employed and have long-term sustainable business growth. But we also are part of these communities too. We coach the baseball teams. We go to the grocery store. We do all those things. We want to be part of these communities. We don't want to just make profits polluting the earth, because guess what? Sometimes short-term that can be okay. Long-term, it's never worked in the history. Any company that is irresponsible on an environmental basis will always fail long-term. And our companies are proud of our environmental record. We're going to continue to do that.
I mean, it's outrageous to think that a company doing business in an area would want to actually destroy that area. And I think that's the false premise. The company wants to thrive and continue to thrive. So they're going to make sure they take care of the resources in there so they can continue. So the company is actually a part of the community. And that is what you need. We built a thriving middle class in this country because of industry. When those industries disappear, that's why you have broken families, the destruction, the crime that you have in communities. Yeah. Communities and industry are one and the same. And it's about time this administration recognizes that.
And they come after. Great point, Donna. I know we got to move on, Gabriella, but to that point, these industries, they have been targeted. They've been targeted by these laws. The bad actors, and let's be honest, there's bad actors. They're weeded out very quickly because they don't make the money, and these laws were meant to protect against them. I actually think these laws were very sound when used with original intent, of course, not some of the intent that's been expanded. We could go into how Congress has abdicated their authority to the executive state on some of those things to have too many whims of these administrations, whether it was our administration, the Trump administration, or the Biden administration. But Donna, your point's so right. These companies live in these communities. They don't want to destroy them. The bad actors, I believe, are weeded out very quick, and it's a very short-term thing. So we got to take that word back and talk about the things that we're doing. And that's what I talk to any industries I work with in companies. Tell your good story. But too many times, the quiet people don't like to talk, and the bad actors are also very loud.
Yeah, points well taken. And that's absolutely true. And anytime you do or see polling, I've seen this and I've written about this for the center. Anytime you take out energy security or energy jobs or that industry, you're going to get fewer people to care about the environment. And we increasingly see in different polls and methodology that the more that you burden people through imposing more costs or taking away industries, they're going to care less about the environment. And when you create that friction, you're not going to inspire people to want to better the environment or to have, stakeholder positions or involvement. And the fact that they're creating this false choice again to say you have to pick one versus the other, and even if it sounds great and it's well intended, nature actually does not benefit because it removes people from the equation. You need human input now to bolster the environment and to ensure that things are managed properly, that there's no catastrophic, let's say, potential disaster like we saw in East Palestine, Ohio, or the Gold King mine spill. So you need industry input, not only from kind of like main energy kind of programs or sort of sectors, but even the derivatives, the petroleum derivatives and the plastics, as you mentioned, Donna, because all of that is very integral. And if we would rather produce it here in the United States, the so-called carbon intensive goods and services, we can do it a lot cleaner, more resourcefully, more responsibly, versus relying on our foreign adversaries. And it's really interesting to see this hypocrisy where this administration and even our the more preservationist folks that we often have to fight and battle with, rhetorically speaking, of course, and even legally speaking, they turn a blind eye to countries where we're currently dependent upon for services or goods or even energy, but they lambast us. Like they put so much scrutiny on the United States, which has the best quality of life, best environmental standards, and then turn a blind eye to countries that engage in slave labor, child labor, have worse environmental footprints. So we are much better situated to develop stuff here in a clean and responsible manner without displacing people from the workforce. And that brings me to another question I want to pose to you both, because we see that, through decades, as standards have improved, the market innovations have been unleashed and technologies are produced in a cleaner fashion with respect to energy. We still see these kind of emergences of ESG. And Donna, particularly for you, with environmental justice, that's an extreme concern for you working in African-American communities. But we see these kind of deviations from true conservation or true classical environmentalism, these kind of philosophies that are emerging and dictating investments in energy, investments in plastics, investments in certain industries that are now vilified. And we have observed at the center, and I know both of you have in your work, that discouraging investment in energy leads to fewer goods and services being done. It shifts kind of the production away from it. It then leads to higher costs for consumers and for producers and then ultimately consumers. And we're seeing this with record levels of inflation, especially as it relates to gas, filling up your tanks, your utility bills. So this discouragement, through ESG and even environmental justice is leading to higher costs, leading to uncertainty. So what are both of your takes on these kind of deviations or these kind of philosophies emerging that are dictating energy policies and then having these adverse effects? And how can they be successfully combated?
Okay, first of all, I really want to explain environmental justice, because the real injustice is the fact that it actually causes higher costs. And the people who are most affected by it are the ones that they claim to want to help, because energy poverty is real. And people who have less income actually have fewer options. And they live in a state of constant survival. because one of the things I like to say is people don't live from week to paycheck to paycheck. Most people, when you see they have this higher energy cost being imposed on them, they live paycheck to Wednesday, and then they have to borrow, and they're always under. But environmental justice is a white liberal, elite liberal program that they created, and then they told Black people to fall in line. Black people didn't ever ask for that. Minorities are not sitting there prioritizing environmental justice when we have so many other issues in the community, like failing schools, high crime, few jobs. And the fact that someone would want to prioritize butterflies on a field over the fact that people are sitting there having to make real choices between paying for food and buying medicine for their kids, that 1 in 5 African Americans has a shut-off notice every day for their utilities. They can barely afford all of the expenses. And then your answer is to what? Create higher energy prices and take away high-paying gateway jobs. That's the wrong thing. You know, in the Inflation Reduction Act, there was $60 billion dedicated to that. $60 billion. That was roughly, at the time when I was looking at, the market capitalization of Ford Motor Company, who employs some 200,000 people and millions of small businesses. And the fact that these people would think that they're going to use this money for what? A few retrofits and some energy efficient windows. None of that money is going to see the community. I can tell you that right now. It's going to NGOs who are using it for God knows whatever. And you heard a lot about the Tulsa Wall Street riots. In today's inflated value, that $60 billion would have had over 2,000 Black Wall Streets around the country. We wouldn't even be talking about poverty or low-income people for that same amount of money. It's an abuse. They're using Black faces to actually blackmail the greater public, pretending that it's actually going to them, the communities, and helping. Is not. And the fact that you have African Americans where the median income is $41,000, and then they project you to get a EV car that's $65,000. They have all of these federal programs. When you hear Biden talk about, like, we gave child care credits and earned income credits to underserved communities. What he doesn't tell you is all of those programs come with an asset limit. That means that you can't own more than $3,000 total assets if you participate in any of these programs. So the fact that they would say, oh, we're going to build charging stations in underserved communities, who for who? They're friends that took the wrong turn on Martin Luther King Boulevard, and they need to make sure they can get home. I mean, we need home ownership. We don't need environmental policies that make everything more expensive, that either destroys projects, creates artificial scarcity so that low-income people can't make it in the middle class. And that's exactly what environmental policies do. I mean, I'll give you an example. In California, they needed 200,000 housing units so that that won't house everybody, but at least it'll give everybody the opportunity to be able to have a middle-class house. Not anything lavish. Environmental policies, because you could bring multiple lawsuits against the same project. They were able to build 1,500. 200,000 versus 1,500. So of course people are going to be priced out of the market. You talked about San Francisco and the Bay Area and how wealthy it is and how jobs move there. Do you know that only 2% of African Americans can afford an average middle class house? 2% because of environmental policies. They're using environmental policies to make sure that they create a permanent barrier so that low income and moderate income individuals can never make it into the middle class. And they're using those same policies to make sure that those that even made it into the middle class get pushed back into poverty. The thought that somehow environmental policies that's going to make everything more expensive is going to help individuals who already have a low income. It's crazy to think of that. And that's the reason why I'm always out there talking about it. Minorities are not asking for that. And actually, it's more harmful to minorities than it is helpful. So we need to look at these policies and say, if the solution is worse than the problem, let's not enact that. We cannot make people an afterthought. And that's what's happening right now. And so environmental justice is the biggest exploitation game of all, because when I go and talk to members of Congress, they don't know that. They hear from activists that are paid to say that. They don't hear from real people that says, can you please stop making my light bill go up because I can't afford it? And the government cannot make everybody whole. Why would you create a program and then say, well, I'm going to give you the subsidy to pay for it? Why just not enact the program in the first place? That's the better solution. And if you can produce energy in this country, it just stands the reason that's going to be cheaper than having to export it from somewhere else. Get it from somewhere else. That means it's going to be higher. And, really that's a tax on the middle class, on the low and minority individuals, because their income is smaller and they have to pay more money for everything. So that's the most egregious. And not on top of that, all the NGOs are using that environmental justice money for slush funds. It's just a payout for the Biden administration's lackeys that supported him during his reign. It's not going to the communities when you have individuals that have low home ownership rates. How are they benefiting from it? They're not.
And you worked with Senator Grassley, right, in his recent investigation, and it found that 90% of environmental justice grants went to overhead pay, the nonprofits, not to the communities that were intended to go to?
Absolutely. You know what? I talked to Senator Grassley's office. I talked to Chair Rogers' office. I've talked to the House Ways and Means Committee, Lauren Boebert. I begged everybody to look into that environmental justice money because I knew it was an abuse. I knew it would never make its way to the community. And I'm so happy that, he actually helped and looked into that and he's still investigating that, because that's an abuse of power. That people think that the money is going to the communities. It's not. And it's not even a priority of the community. And so, looking into it, it was a payday for all of those people that helped the Biden administration out. And you know what? It should be a crime. Somebody should pay a cost. And that was the thing that I said. This should be criminal. The fact that they could take this money in the name of someone else and then abuse it and use it for their own gain.
Christian, how is ESG investing and similar posturing affecting the coal industry? Because for oil and gas, and I believe coal as well, the discouragement of investments has led to fewer and fewer companies looking into operations like some of the member organizations and companies you deal with. So talk about the effects of that and what that does to depress further exploration and continued reliance, even though coal underpins a lot of energy out there today and a lot of infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, look at all the war on coal that is done to us. I mean, the Obama administration, Biden, I can't say that they haven't had victories, but we're still 20% of the nation's energy source of coal. We're still, on any given day in the hot summer or cold winter, we've been the top energy source in the country as soon as last year. So we haven't gone anywhere despite all those things happening. And ESG is a real problem. And I talk to people all the time and they're like, is this just, they say, is it some right-wing talking point, the ESG? I can tell you I've been in meetings, I've heard it. As we seek capital funding for our coal projects, there's banks, there's funds that will not deal with thermal coal, the coal used for burning and making energy. They won't deal with us. And if they do, you better have a lot of really good statements on your ESG policy to try to give them cover when they talk to their shareholders. So ESG is a real problem. It's hard to have long-term business plans, access to capital. It's a scary thought if they're going to put credit scores, social credit scores on companies. What's the next step does that mean? I mean, that's the scary part about it. And it's happening today in America. You've seen it from some of the largest hedge funds and economic institutions in the world talking about ESG. You had the SEC come out with their ESG climate disclosure rules. I mean, it is absolutely sad, and we face it every single day. Now, one thing, as I was listening to Donna talk, which I enjoyed, I could have sat here and listened for the next 2 hours. So I was just enjoying that. But you go to these developing countries, again, I cited my wife's from Vietnam. So you go to Southeast Asia, Africa, Latin America, and I would love to see a poll on where climate change ranks on the issues that they care about every single day. My guess is it's going to be very low, if it's even 1%, because what people want is access to baseload electricity. It's the foundation of life. It's what coal provides. We have the best coal in America right here in our borders. Wyoming coal, some of the cleanest burning coal in the world. We could export that to Southeast Asia. They have an appetite for it. They need it. We could export it to Africa. But unfortunately, because of policies, both from the administration, both from state administrations on the West Coast, we struggle to have export capacity because they don't like what we do. ESG leads to a credit score and says, coal, you're bad. We're not going to let you go through our ports, which means it hurts people across the globe. The same people that, as Donna so eloquently was talking about, they say they want to help. We want to help those people too, because every country that's a successful economy in the world was built on one thing: electricity and access to baseload electricity. What we've provided, coal built the strongest middle class the world's ever seen right here in America. Coal also won 2 world wars for us. Right outside my office here, I have a poster from the National Fuel Administration from the 1930s that said, help the boys in the trenches in the blue and mine more coal. From our national government as soon as 1930s, almost 100 years ago now. We once believed what we know what economies can be built on, and that's baseload electricity. And now here we fight ESG issues, capital issues. We want to open new coal mines because despite, as I started this conversation, all the policies, we still have great markets. Our companies are still doing very well despite everything coming out of it. So we need to get rid of ESG policies. We need banks to invest on people that deserve good investments. And we have to let the world have access to the things that we can do here in America. I'm a coal guy, but also natural gas. I mean, you see what happens with LNG exports. I'm obviously not an expert on that, but my friends in that world, it's the same type of situation. It's all, you have policies that are decades ahead of technologies. And we cannot operate governments like that. That is just not the way we should do it. We need to be, again, as Donna said, very people-focused, because that's the people we care about. I believe in having people build out of poverty, not putting them in poverty because they happen to live in an area that, doesn't quite fit what the current government thinks is the good way to go.
Net zero policies certainly lead to instability and poverty. That's what we're learning. Yes, Donna, do you want to add something?
I was going to say, having a government dictate what we should build is the most inefficient use of resources that you can ever have. Markets determine that. And the fact that this administration has to put in heavy subsidies in industry tell you that that's not what people want. You build a good product, people will use it. You don't have a good product, people won't use it.
Amen.
And that's the bottom line. Let the markets determine what we need, not the government, because let me tell you something. Big government has never built anything that was worth that the American people want. The only thing that all of these policies do, build a bigger government, cause more barriers, cause more harms to people that they say they want to help.
Spot on, Donna. And I got to piggyback off that too. So when you talk about markets, she's so right. You look at wind and solar and renewable projects, whether it was in the IRA or just in general tax extenders bills we see every year. You have investment tax credits they have production tax credits, they get all these tax breaks. If we as coal industry could compete on a fair level, we would win 99% of the time. 99%, but the government basically props these industries up and makes it so economical to build them that utilities and other folks, they're like, we got to do it. It makes too much market sense, but it's not real market sense. It's government-driven market sense, which is the problem. And you see today, and even, my friends, they know I work in coal, but they read the news and they don't understand what I do in energy policy every day. They'll say stuff like, well, they shut down an 800 megawatt coal plant, but they're building 800 megawatts of renewables. So that's good. At least we're replacing that, Christian. So that solves the blackouts. I said, not at all, because 800 megawatts of renewables is not 800 megawatts of coal. Because the problem is when the wind isn't blowing, the sun's not shining, those 800 megawatts are completely irrelevant. And if heaven forbid we were in an actual fight here in this country where we got to build things and have capital intensive industries, those 800 megawatts are irrelevant on some of the worst days we have in this country. I live in Ohio. I'm looking outside. It's rainy and cloudy right now, like London, England. This would not be a good day to have rooftop solar. Hawaii, it makes a ton of sense. I get it. But in a lot of places in this country, especially heavily manufacturing places like Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, everywhere in the Midwest, we need real electricity, which is baseload electricity from coal. Those megawattage hours do not add up, even though the numbers look very the same. So it's funny how the government, you see DOE, you see the White House go, well, we're replacing the megawattage. We won't have blackout issues. Look at what FERC statements are about that. It's incredibly egregious the way that they try to frame that. It's just really, really sad. And I think we need to get that message out to more people that we're facing a crisis. And again, in my years in energy policy, I've never seen the reliability crisis highlighted this high, whether it's in congressional committees, whether it's in Wall Street Journal op-ed, The Coming Electricity Crisis, which came out 2 weeks ago. It's a great read. I encourage anybody watching this now to read that, or even articles that talk about big tech CEOs talking about AI, talking about all these new EVs, as Donna mentioned earlier too, as we like to joke, coal-powered cars. But all these new technologies, what are they doing? I can tell you they're not declining the need for baseload energy. So you have policies that say one thing and industries that say another, and it all goes back to none of this makes sense with capital markets. And we got to figure out to have policies that actually match technologies and not have government subsidizing people. We just have to stop that, or else we're going to have a crisis, and we don't want people to lose lives. That's the number one thing. We're all about making sure people have access and the right to live. And we live in the greatest country in the world. And I still believe that despite our challenges today, we cannot have any of those things happen. And we have to alert our governments and people that it's coming if we don't do something about it now.
Absolutely.
As we round out our conversation, you both have been fantastic and have offered a lot of expertise and insight into this energy landscape and what's to be ahead and the challenges we face with a very burdensome regulatory environment. I want to kind of ask you both to leave something more positive. How can we chart a positive, classical environmental, true conservation course going forward? What needs to be done?
Well, I would say, while we're developing some of these technologies, we still need to make it where we're not mandating people out of business. I mean, I can't sit there and say, you know what, I prefer Pepsi, so let's mandate Coke and make it illegal. No, markets determine the best products. And if you want an EV, have at it. But don't make it impossible for people to have private car ownership with a gas-powered car if that suits their needs. The other thing is, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your industry, because for minorities who have lower college degrees, those kind of jobs are high paying, and it gives them the opportunity to buy homes, to have a higher income so that they can build a family. They can't make it in these so-called government subsidies. And it seems like that's the way our government wants us to be. People take pride in being able to work with their own hands and create their own wealth. Let us do that. We want to have our own jobs. We want to build our own futures. We don't want to have a government give us a universal basic income and tell us, that's what we need. There's no dignity in that. The dignity comes from the fact that we can determine our own fate. And what this country was built on.
Well, Thanks, Donna. And I'll tell you too, the comment about the jobs, I had to chuckle about 6 months ago. The company I represent, which is just a fantastic coal company, opened up what I believe are the newest mines, coal mine in America still today. There might have been a newer one, which is good news, but I think we're at least the newest one in West Virginia. Created 50 jobs immediately, very great paying jobs in an area where the poverty levels hover around 20%. We create these jobs today. But yet the Secretary of Energy came and talked about jobs of the future in the state of West Virginia, the same time frame. I'm like, we literally just did this today and put all these people back to work. You could come see the trucks in our parking lot at our coal mine today. But yes, please talk about 10 years down the line and how much taxpayer money we're going to need for whatever it was the secretary was there talking about. So they're just never going to kind of get it. At least it's not this administration. But I am an optimist, Gabriella, to your point. I believe, once again, we live in the greatest country in the world. It's the reason that someone, and I've cited my wife a bunch of times, and I do it because I love her story. My wife's a refugee from Vietnam. My father-in-law fought on our side during the Vietnam War. They came as part of a program that President Reagan set up. And hearing her stories, how she grew up in Vietnam, and the opportunities that we have here today, that our children we have here, we live in the greatest country. These things tend to solve themselves because although we get in really tough spots, especially on energy policy, and I've been in the coal business now for 15 years, some of the most dire times, I know things are going to change because I do believe we're on the right side. That doesn't mean we communicate every day and get everybody to our side, but I think we have the right arguments, and people are going to start to learn that. And I think we've seen FERC and we've seen all these government entities starting to come out and say, whoa, this is too fast, it's too quick, and people are going to suffer. I'm really thinking that, number one, we have an election in November. People are going to have the ability to go out and have their voices heard. If the election goes the way that I think it's going to go, I think we're going to get some really sound energy policies in. And I think those policies will change the way people think because they'll be like, no, this is not a binary choice, as we started this conversation about, between the environment and industry. That if you're going to have a bad environment, if you have a good industry, it's actually false. The better the industry is, the more money spent on reclamation, the more money spent on technology and emissions controls and all the things that make this the cleanest air and cleanest water in the world. I have faith. I think the American people are going to see it. The American people are a lot smarter than their government thinks of them, and I think they're going to see that in November. Those of us that work in energy policy are going to see much brighter days, which much brighter things ahead. And I'll tell you what, we're going to do it, and I think that people across the globe just need to make your voices heard. As Donna talks to her legislators, I talk to legislators. They need to as well. Tell people you support baseload electricity, whether it be from coal, natural gas, nuclear, whatever. We need to support these things because that's what drives the American economy into the 21st century.
We've had invaluable insights from both Donna and Christian, who are integral members to our CEC Advisory Board. And if those of you watching are curious to learn what they are up to, what our center is up to, what I am up to, and our visiting fellows and everyone on staff who contributes very invaluable insights and content to the CEC, I encourage you to check out iwf.org/CEC. We also have a monthly newsletter called Clearing the Air, where we have profiled both Donna and Christian's efforts because they are so valuable and they're knowledgeable, and we would love to keep this conversation going, but we want to point you to these resources and encourage you to connect with Donna and Christian individually. They have social media. I listed their organization, so if you need to reach out to them, want to reach out to them, they're great resources. I thank you both for joining us on this very special Earth Day, and everyone watching too. Know that this is supposed to be, we can take back this holiday because there are a lot of very negative connotations assigned to it. We see kind of this, again, this binary choice of having to choose the environment versus a sustainable economic growth plan. We don't have to sacrifice. We can better nature while all the while, increasing productivity in this country. And that is what the CEC stands for. So thank you, Donna and Christian, and everyone for watching and participating.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Gabriella.